Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me in this lesson. Today I'm so excited to talk about conditional sentences. So without even wasting time, let's get started. Let's go into the lesson. Let's start by defining conditional sentences. What are conditional sentences? These are sentences that address both factual scenarios and hypothetical situations along with their potential consequences. So there are times when we talk about certain situations which are factual or which are unreal. And we may talk about those situations and their consequences. And most likely, we are going to use conditional sentences because those consequences are as a result of the situations we are talking about. Conditional sentences consist of a conditional clause, which is introduced by the word if, and a consequent clause, which shows the consequence of the condition or the situation that has been fulfilled or not fulfilled. There are many different ways we can express such ideas where we can talk about conditions and their consequences. And there are different expressions or structures for that. To start with, let's look at zero conditional sentences. These are used to express general truths or facts, and they emphasize cause and effect relationships. Let's look at an example so that we can just put this into context. If you teach students, they pass with high marks. If you teach students, they pass with high marks. Now, you can see in this sentence that we are talking about a situation where students are taught very well. And if students are taught, the result or the consequence is that they pass with high marks. Let me look at another example. When the temperature drops below freezing, water turns to ice. When the temperature drops below freezing, water turns to ice. So again, in these situations, we are just talking about general truths, things that happen when certain conditions are fulfilled. You can add your own example to the ones I've given. For example, you can say, if I go to visit my uncle, he buys me shoes. If I go to visit my uncle, he buys me shoes. That's just a general truth. That is what generally happens when someone visits their uncle. What is your situation? Give me one example. Now, let's look at this before we leave this topic or this section. Both the conditional clause and the consequent clause employ the simple present tense. So if you look at the two sentences that we have here, if you teach students, you can see that teach is in simple present tense. They pass, and pass is also simple present tense. So in both the conditional clause, which is introduced by the word if, and the consequent clause, which shows the result or the effect, you can see that the tense is in present simple tense. Let's look at the first conditional sentences. These discuss situations with probable outcomes in the future. So we are talking about situations where we talk about probable outcomes in the future. The conditional clause employs the simple present tense, while the consequent clause uses the simple future tense. So here we are talking about simple present tense and future tense. Let's look at an example. If it rains tomorrow, I will bring an umbrella. This situation is probable, or this situation is likely. So we are talking about the likely conditions. Some people call them likely conditions. Another example, if she studies hard, she will pass the exam. If she studies hard, she will pass the exam. Look at the use of tenses. The if clause is using the present simple tense, but the consequent clause is using the simple future tense. That's why we are using the word will. She will pass. I will bring an umbrella in both examples. What is your example? The next one is called the second conditional sentence or the second conditional sentences. And these address unlikely or improbable situations. In some books, they are referred to as unlikely conditions. The conditional clause utilizes the simple past tense, while the consequent clause often incorporates a modal auxiliary verb. So we are talking about the if clause using the simple past tense. Now, a simple past tense is just a verb that, in general, where we add ed. For example, she baked, or she went, or I ate. Any tense that fits the criteria that I've just described is a simple past tense. The consequent clause, on the other hand, incorporates a modal auxiliary verb. Let's look at an example to understand. If I were president, I would implement reforms. If I had a time machine, I would visit ancient civilizations. You can see again, this one, we are talking about a situation that is unlikely. Unlikely in the sense that when somebody says, if I were a president, it means that they are not a president. And because they are not a president, they would not implement any reforms. If I had a time machine, this situation is unlikely. Why? Because this person does not have a time machine, and therefore they would not visit ancient civilizations. So there are times when we talk about improbable things in real life, and we can follow this pattern to construct such sentences. The next one is called the third conditional sentence, and it is also referred to as the impossible conditions in some books. Impossible condition in some books. What does the impossible condition do? It reflects on unrealized possibilities or regrets in the past. So there is, or there might have been something that we needed to do or we didn't need to do, but we did it, and therefore we've got these consequences in which we are living, and therefore it kinds of brings in regret because of certain unrealized possibilities, either by commission or omission. Let's look at an example. If they had listened, they wouldn't be in this predicament, which means that in the past, people did not listen, and therefore did not therefore find themselves in a particular predicament or particular situation. So the result or the consequence of whatever they did not do or did in the past haunts them now, and this is why this sounds more like a regret. You can also say, if I had gone to see my grandmother, I would have talked to her before she died. You can see again in that situation, you are talking about things that you did not do. Let's look at the second example. If I had known, I wouldn't have missed my flight, meaning that this person didn't know and therefore they missed their flight. Now, let's look at the explanation for this. The conditional clause features the past perfect tense. In this case, where you are presenting unrealized possibilities or regrets, you use the past perfect tense for the conditional clause. Okay, so the if clause of this type of conditional tense or conditional sentence goes with the past perfect tense. The consequent clause combines a modal auxiliary verb with the past participle form of a verb. The modal auxiliary verb could be would have, could have, might have. Any of those can work depending on what you are trying to say and the attitude that you want to attach to it, or the emotions that you want to attach to it. So it combines with the past participle form of a verb to denote hypothetical outcome. Expressions with unless and alternatives. So far, what we have looked at is that we can construct conditional sentences using the word if. But there are times when we don't want to use the word if. We can use other alternatives, and one of them is unless. So as you can see, unless is used to denote a condition that, if not met, leads to a particular consequence. In short, the word unless means if not, and therefore it talks about a condition that is that when not met leads to a particular situation or a particular consequence. Let's look at an example. Unless we sell more tickets, the show will be cancelled. So in this sentence, we are replacing if and we are adding a negative because unless has got the word if in it and it has got a negative in it. So unless we sell tickets, the show will be cancelled. This means that if we do not sell more tickets, that is the meaning in that one. Let's look at the explanation. The present simple tense is employed in the unless clause, while the verbs such as shall, should, will, would, can, could, may, or might are deployed in the main clause, as we have seen from the example. We have used the word will. Okay, thank you so much. Let's look at other ways that we can talk about conditional sentences. We can use the word should and had in formal contexts. So if you are writing in academic or in formal situations, you can use these to avoid the monotony of using the word if. If whatever you are writing or you are talking about requires you to use conditional sentences, should plus subject plus verb can replace if for formal conditions. Let's look at an example. Should you, so that should is the same should that we have in the first point here. And then you is the subject, wish is the verb. So should you wish to meet, contact my secretary. We are saying this word is replacing if. So in the first example, it's more like saying, if you wish to meet, contact my secretary. So again, to avoid the monotony of saying if, you can use the word should. Should you wish to meet, contact my secretary. The next one is had plus subject plus verb can substitute if in third conditionals. Now, we talked about third conditionals and we said these are also referred to as impossible conditions. Let's look at an example. Had I known, I would have invited you. Had I known, I would have invited you. So go on and make your own sentences and let's see how this helps. The next is if plus where to in formal contexts. This discusses unlikely events. Unlikely conditions fall under the second condition or the improbable condition. Let's look at an example. If the PM were to resign, an election must follow. Where plus subject verb inversion. Were we to stop, democracy would end. Were we to stop, democracy would end. Another formal structure is if plus where to, which are employed in the improbable events. For example, you can say, if we were to go to town, we would buy ABC. If we were to go home, we would just be sleeping. If we were to go, you can go on and on giving your own examples, but that's how those structures work. The next one is as long as and so long as. Now, these are used to impose specific conditions or limits. There are times when we express ideas where we give conditions and impose specific conditions or limits on those ideas we are talking about. Let's look at an example. If you say, play as long as you don't make a mess. So you can see how we are using as long as. It is introducing a consequence that introduces a limit, or it introduces a condition that introduces a limit or a condition. And the condition is as long as you don't make a mess. So if you want, you can even start this sentence by saying, as long as you don't make a mess, comma, play. Let's look at another example. A tiger is invisible so long as it stays still. A tiger is invisible so long as it stays still. So again, if you look at this example using so long as, you can see somehow it sounds like, yes, there are limits or conditions that are being imposed. The next one is on condition that and provided that. So you can say the bank lent the company money on condition that they repay it within 6 months. You can receive a senior citizen's discount provided you possess a valid rail card. You can see all these, how we are making conditional sentences using different structures and different words instead of using if. Supposing that may be employed with a conditional meaning, invite the listener to envision a situation. When we're using supposing that, it has got a meaning where we are inviting the listener to envision a situation. Let's look at this example. Supposing I don't arrive till after midnight, will the guest house still be open? You can see this is a situation when it's supposing that. It's like you want the person listening to you to envision or to understand the situation or to look at the situation. Let's look at another example. Supposing you lost your passport, you would have to go to the embassy, wouldn't you? Supposing he hadn't recognized us, he might never have spoken to us. So all these different situations, all these different examples indicate that when we say supposing that, we are trying to help the listener to imagine or to envision a situation that we are trying to talk to them about. The next one is very interesting to me because I've always been thinking about only if and if only and their differences. I am so glad that they are in this topic. So when we talk about only if, we are expressing a strict condition for a specific outcome, and the result can occur only one specific condition, under only one specific condition. Let's look at examples. If someone says you can attend the party only if you finish your homework, it means that they are imposing a particular condition for the result to happen or for the consequence to be seen. The next example, the company will promote you only if you meet the sales target. Again, you can see that this condition helps us to understand situations where strict conditions are given for specific outcomes. This one is followed by another condition structure, which is if only. If only means that, or if only indicates a wish, a regret, or a longing about a situation that is not true or a situation that has not happened. The speaker wishes for something to be different or expresses regret about the past. Let's look at this example. If only I had studied harder, I would have passed the exam. So you can see, because this talks about regret, what other structure or what other situations can you think, or what other types of conditional sentences can you think about? The third conditional sentences, or the impossible conditions, they are the ones where we express regrets. Sometimes you may be asked to rewrite these sentences from if only to the third conditional sentence or the impossible conditions. You just need to know how to deal with them. The next one is the use of the word or and otherwise. These introduce alternative consequences. For example, start studying or you will fail. Send it to Express, otherwise it will take days. Again, we can see how we are using these, and they suggest an introduction of alternative consequences. So, the use of or and otherwise in conditional sentences is very specific, very simple in introducing alternative consequences. Let's you look at supposing in conditional sentences. How do we use supposing or supposing that? This one helps us to envision hypothetical scenarios or situations, or to imagine hypothetical situations. Let's look at an example. Supposing I arrive late, will it be open? Supposing, so again, this is very important. It is similar to supposing that. So supposing and supposing that are just the same. Others will say supposing, others will say supposing that. So let's look at the next example. Supposing you lost your passport, you would need the embassy. Again, you can see how those go. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the lesson. All I can say is that mastering conditional sentences and their structures, you can convey ideas with clarity and impact. And for those of you that are writing exams, It's very important because the way transformation questions come, they will present a sentence in one structure and want you to write using a different structure. And it's important that you master all these structures. Thank you very much.